started. We are going to be moving to the gallery, so instead of seeing it all flat on the screen, we're going to get to see it in person. So this is your chance to get your coffee and drinks and fruit and all of that. And you can do that while I'm talking. I won't be offended, but I want you to take advantage. So good afternoon. I'm Glory Simmons, the director of the Thacher Gallery. And thank you for joining us and spending time with us today for a presentation and conversation with curator Karen Rapp. And then for those of you who aren't making the connections, this program is part of the 24th Global Feminist Forum at USF. So I just wanted you to know a little bit about that. So to begin, we'd like to start by thanking the original stewards of this territory, the Ramaytush Ohlone. We also acknowledge the intertwined legacies of settler colonialism, the transatlantic slave trade, and the trans-Pacific exploitation of Asian workers who contributed to the founding of San Francisco and the wealth of this university and this country. The forum builds on this history and its intersections with another movement. March 8th is celebrated around the world as International Women's Day. It was first recognized in the US in 1909 when working class immigrant women marched through the streets of New York City to protest the terrible sweatshop conditions and to demand both bread, so wages, and roses, recognition. So something to think about today. For the past 2 decades, the Global Feminist Forum at USF has celebrated and recognized those who work toward liberation for all, especially the efforts of Indigenous women and women of color who are fighting to transform the injustices built into our political, economic, and social systems. So thank you for being a part of this conversation. And also I want to thank the individuals who are helping make it happen, including Spencer Rengich and Olivia Luttrell. Thank you, Spencer. And Thacher Gallery is really proud to be a part of the Global Feminist Forum and to have Sonia Romero taken root as part of it as well. So before introducing the exhibition and curator, I would also like to acknowledge the people who worked on the exhibition, and that includes Victoria Farlow, who's the program assistant for the Thacher Gallery, the students who helped to install from the Thacher Practicum class. I don't know if is anybody here from that class? Yay, thank you. Oh yeah, from past and present, yes. And then the amazing gallery staff, Priscilla Origi, Catherine Clark, Diego Gomez, and Mela Lisner. Thank you very much. They've done outreach, they've installed work, they lit work, and the gallery just wouldn't exist without them. So yes, thank you. So now about Taken Root. Sonia Romero Taken Root features LA artist Sonia Romero and was curated by Karen Rapp, who's here. So Sonia's here. Yay. And Karen is here. Karen's the curator and director of Loyola Marymount University's Laband Art Gallery, where the exhibition debuted in fall of 2023. So we thank you both for being here this week, spending so much time with us. As curator at Laband, Karen Rapp has been recognized throughout her career for her promotion of the visual arts within higher education, championing interdisciplinary connections between campus and external communities through exhibitions and public programming. Prior to her work at the Laband, Karen served as museum director of the Vincent Price Art Museum at East LA College from 2007 to 2015. As part of her tenure there, she directed the ambitious expansion of the museum facility into a standalone 40,000 square foot space on the college's campus in Monterey Park. I'm so jealous, but not of the work, but of the space.
This is amazing.
From 1998 to 2005, she served in the successive roles of Assistant Director, Curator, and Director of the Sweeney Art Gallery at UC Riverside. This exhibition that you're going to see really soon is an example of her detailed curatorial approach that combines her appreciation for materials and process, her love of LA and community, and her sincere care for the artist and her work. Yeah, it's true. Having worked with her these past few years, I want to say how much I admire her meticulous research and professionalism, as well as her curiosity and warmth as a colleague. I'm grateful for her collaboration throughout, so it's been marvelous. So thank you. Should we head over?
Sure, I can say a few words.
Great.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm thrilled at how many of you are students, and I really want to kind of carry on this spirit of generosity that Glory has cultivated with the Thacher, and really welcoming a student community to be part of the process, the front of house and the behind the scenes, because that's something that I really cherish as well. But before we go over to the gallery, I want to thank Glory as well, and the students who are here and the ones that I've met from the Thacher and USF and your wonderful colleagues, because I was just speaking with a family friend who studied cognitive science at Berkeley and knows a lot about personality types, and I feel like in this field that I am in, that Glory is in, that rather than feeling competitive or at odds with people who are similar to you and questioning, well, why is this person getting the break and I'm not getting ahead? It's such a wonderful feeling to, now the term is uplift, that's what you all say, to be able to like recognize the hard work in one another and to appreciate it and to celebrate it. So thank you for celebrating my work. And Sonia, thank you for being this amazing partner, because there's a lot of trust and there's a lot of relationship building in this kind of exchange of ideas. And so I'm very appreciative of that, because it really is better when you have people on a team. So I made this switch about changing from this format to the gallery because I think I would rather do a walk and talk. So I invite everybody to cross the plaza and then reconvene quickly and go through the show together. The title of this event, and then also because so many of you are my people, because so many of you are studying things that are really, I feel, I share so much in common with you that I want to be personal, where I many times would skip over this sort of introductory part that, as you heard from Glory's introduction, for the most part, I have always been at this intersection between presenting artwork in a public setting like this gallery and then embedded within higher education. So it has gone from the UC system to a California community college to Loyola Marymount University. And I didn't know at the time, when I finished my master's program in a history department that had a practical master's, in the sense that it was not designed for people to go into teaching. It was designed for people who wanted to care for collections and objects, and it was sort of pre-digital in terms of how things were organized, and databases and all of that were just coming up in a way to apply to collections. found myself working in an archive, or I could have found myself working in a standalone museum, but I have found that for me personally, higher ed in the United States at large is comprised of institutions that I personally respect, that I have a lot of faith in. They are not perfect. Many times we're reading about mistakes made in higher education, but they represent something that I find important in terms of acquiring an education, and they tend to be environments of positivity, I find. That you are all here to reach your goal, to graduate. And I can vicariously feel that goal-oriented lifestyle that you have, and sort of take that on and feel that outside of this institution, things can get very critically difficult, but that there is a certain degree of hope. Because you are here and you are moving forward. As you said to me when we were walking over, your dad is encouraging you to try new things. That's like nirvana for me, that is something that can happen. So I want to set that sort of as my own background. And then to be a curator for me became a choice that was pointed out to me during an internship that I had as a grad student by a curator of a head of a department at the LA County Museum of Art. And I am not telling all of you that this is true in life. What I'm saying is it was true for me. That Leslie Green Bowman, a curator of decorative arts, posited to me that in my future, I should think about whether I wanted to be focusing on people, meaning artists, or objects. That there would be kind of a fork in the road that would then push me in either direction. And I took that very much to heart, and I went in the direction of people. And that was a very conscious choice. And that doesn't mean that I'm not always working with material, but my goal, almost the way that I pointed out in the lecture hall, is about those relationships, is about having the team, is about getting to know people. And those are the privileges and the luxuries that I have as a curator. So Sonia, where are you?
I think she's just stepped away.
Pardon me?
She stepped away for just a second.
Okay, when she comes back, then I'm going to have her be a little bit closer so that I can do a fact check with her. I've been doing this work since 1998, so it's coming up on 30 years. I still get excited. I got excited walking into this space on Monday, seeing the work. And I'm going to keep doing it as long as I have that enthusiasm. And I'm going to keep doing what I've been doing since I started, which is to think about what's missing in the art world at large. And if we fast forward through the last 3 decades, that has become to some extent appreciated and celebrated, and now rejected. And by asking what's missing, initially my questions were in the 90s, which artists and which ideas can I bring to the fore that are not already out in circulation. So in other words, to do something original that also has meaning. And ultimately, I think whether we're talking about the Thacher, if we talk about SF MoMA, if we talk about the museum, BAMFA at Berkeley, all these institutions are made up of people, and then the people who are at these institutions, their value systems, their priorities, their vision, their lack of vision is guiding. And that's how my life path has kind of evolved. Today, literally, my career would be called woke. That is not a term that existed. If woke means paying attention to what's missing and celebrating a wider spectrum of artists, yeah, I own that. That is who I am, and that's what I want to continue to promote. Very often, I have curated shows like Taken Root. My background is in history. My first question is always, what else is out there? And in this case, about Sonia Romero. What else has she done? Where else has she shown? In what contexts? That's kind of my history training, where it's like thinking about almost creating a bibliography when you have to do a paper, right? And you have to then have sources. I need that anchor, in a sense. Now, it helped, Sonia, sorry, that I knew Sonia. I organized the show in 2023, but Sonia and I met in 2009. And I did a mini show with Sonia at the Vincent Price Art Museum that you heard was 40,000 square feet. When it opened to the public in 2011, Sonia was one of 6 shows featured in the space. And she made beautiful new work, and it was amazing, but I always had felt at that time, that point in my career, that having a new building open, it overwhelmed me professionally and personally, and I wanted to revisit. I wanted to have the opportunity to reconnect. And I did that at LMU. LMU is like your university here, has the different areas of art making, and in the printmaking studio, the faculty member who had been overseeing it after 40 years retired, and we hired a new printmaking professor. And that was sort of the impetus then for me to say, I'm going to celebrate this new person. I'm going to celebrate the students who are going to benefit from having a new vision in the studio. And I'm going to come back and revisit Sonia's practice and tell a much bigger story. So the little show that was organized had maybe 15 pieces in it. And this has more than 50. Many people, I think, even in a university setting, are looking at the work of a curator, maybe also the work of an artist. I'm sure you'll get asked this question, what is it that you actually are doing with your time? And for me, I take a lot of I hope respect for the opportunity and privilege to ask someone to share their life, to open up the proverbial drawers in their studio, and to be kind of vulnerable with the curator. So the reason I'm kind of planning myself here and not moving into the show is just, this is the first piece of the show, and there was a little bit of a push and pull between us when I saw this piece in Sonia's drawer, and I had this moment of, oh my God, look what you were doing when you were in high school, Sonia. And if everybody kind of wants to come a little bit closer to it so that you can appreciate this. It's an untitled piece. It's an etching on paper. Sonia went to a very prestigious and at the same time down-to-earth art. Can we call it a magnet?
It's a magnet.
It's a magnet.
Arts magnet.
Arts magnet. The acronym in LA is called LACSA, the Los Angeles County School for the Arts. It's both visual and performing. And she made this piece, and for me, seeing this was like, oh my gosh, I'm seeing into this person's childhood. And this, we're going to see the last work in the show that she made in 2023, and there's a direct connection between these pieces and how she formally makes the work and then the concepts that she's having about the work. And that is an exciting insight for me. That's an exciting revelation. And then a privilege to be able to kind of decide, because everything is a decision. Nothing just kind of appears in a show. Glory and the students made the choices about everything that's in here. They did have the fortune of knowing what would be in the show because I had already organized it in Los Angeles. But every decision, every placement is a human touch. So this piece opens the show for me because it really introduces Sonia's imagination. And what the label actually talks about is how influenced she was by reading, and that her mother, and we were talking about childhood books, Heidi, just before the talk began, how much that has influenced, I think, how you see the world. From fairy tales, the good ones, the one where I guess the frog and all those things happen in a good way, to the ones that are very punishing, possibly, and there's the morality lessons. But a lot of that has stayed, I think, with you, and that is so fascinating for me to see that brought out in her work. And so that's an example of what does a curator do? It's kind of that give and take then with the artist and having that intention. So the pieces in this area are very much coming from Sonia's practice as a printmaker. She attended RISD as an undergraduate, so she went from Los Angeles to the East Coast, to Providence, Rhode Island. She went to art school. And I think you've talked about, Sonia, how it was your idea that you would study painting, but when you got there, it was almost because of the spatial arrangements a little bit, the studio, the people, the teachers that drew you to printmaking studio, right? Yeah, what was the pivotal?
I was attracted to the printmaking program at RISD because it was smaller than the painting program, and you got more one-on-one time, and I really was drawn to learning process and technique as opposed to art theory, which I'm not as interested in. So, yeah.
So these pieces. Those are both screen prints that were made in Los Angeles at a very highly regarded community center called Self-Help Graphics. Sonia's entire practice since childhood, age 17, the etching there, is always and already celebrating printmaking and then flirting almost and kind of taking detours and circuitous paths around other forms that would include painting, for example, and then working in public art. So for me as a curator, I do want you to read these labels. I am a proponent of labels. They're probably at conferences for museums, sessions where people just sit down and talk about, should we write a label? How long should the label be? What should a label say? I come down on the side of yes, but make it brief. Maybe 200, 150 words. But I also want people who choose to ignore the label to get something out of the work. So I don't know if in this context anybody is feeling confident enough to just maybe make a comment about what you see. Like, this is a beloved piece that Sonia made after going to RISD. What you think about the work, what it might tell you about her. Anybody? Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so, I don't know, like, based off, like, first glances, I see that it's, like, depicting the outfit, and, like, she, like, illustrated animals as well. I didn't look too, like, deeply into the pictures, but you can see, like, the letters and then the animals as well.
Does it seem super serious to you, or?
I feel like it could. It seems like there's some serious undertones.
Okay.
But, like, off the bat, it seems like really lighthearted.
Lighthearted, yeah.
Yeah, I guess, like, the dark ink makes it feel more serious as well.
Yeah, and maybe the presentation too, right? The fact that it's in this case kind of gives it this sense of importance too. Yeah. I really am drawn to the playful qualities in her work. This also coming back again to children's literature, to illustration. This piece is actually wonderful in the sense to say to all of you, practice makes perfect. We do not start out being great at something, but in this case, Sonia comes back from RISD, is in Los Angeles, has a studio that she opens up in LA. There's this adorable photo of her. This is where I met her, in her studio. She named the studio She Rides the Lion. She apprenticed for a year with a master lino cut artist from Mexico and gave herself the challenge of producing 26 lino cuts plus the front and end piece to master this technique. And you say it took about a year to do, which is kind of incredible.
I made this piece when I was about 23, right after college.
So when I am choosing an artist to work with and I'm making the choices about what will be in the show, this is very much, to me, playing into the environment of a university. And I'm going to contrast that with many of you, I hope all of you will, see Amy Sherald's show at SF MoMA. Sonia and I checked it out on Monday. Some of you have gone, right, for a class? What astounded me about that painting show, I'm guessing there are like maybe 75 works in the show altogether. It's a lot of work for the museum to bring all of those pieces that she made back from all the places where those pieces reside. We looked at one that Anderson Cooper owns, and they're all over the place. But they did not show us anything about the beginning of Amy that I remember. What I remember was there was one particular painting. It had a really strong shadow effect on the face. It was the first one of these 3/4 pieces that she made. And we did see the room where she is talking and the pictures of her studio, but we always saw things that were, ready for prime time, so to speak. And I'm really interested in showing the steps that an artist is taking to get to that point. And that's just a curatorial, preference. And I would say if I look back over my career of working with artists, this is a through line. And one of my favorite things to have happen, that's kind of my ego that gets gratified as a curator, is when the artist comes and goes, I didn't remember doing that, but that was pretty amazing. That they're introducing themselves back to themselves and then feeling good about it. That makes me feel good in these little ways. So you'll see in the show that it's talking about the process to get to the point of mastery, or to get to the point of the masterpiece. Not a word I use in my everyday language, but that idea of the end all be all. So I'm thinking, do a deep dive into one of her public art pieces, because I think it really helps talk about the magic of Sonia's process, and then my own soapbox. So I mentioned that I had met Sonia in 2009 in her studio, and I did a mini show. And then over the period of almost 15 years, Sonia had applied for and won 10 public art commissions in Los Angeles. And very briefly in my career, between one of these college, university, gallery positions that you heard about, I did work in a public art office for the County of LA. And I really enjoyed it, but I missed this because I was in an office all the time. And one of the things that I've noticed about the art world, and again, this idea of what is missing, is that very often an artist who is making work in the public is not getting the kind of recognition that she might be getting for her fine art. So it was really important to me when I reconnected with Sonia to learn about and then to celebrate, but to educate the public art accomplishments that she has. And by showing her then maybe when you walk by something when you're going to the airport for spring break next week and you pass by and you go, oh, look at that, that you might walk over and go, oh, this is cool, and check it out. Because they tend to kind of be part of our environment, but we don't always, look away from our devices. So there are 5 of those 10 public art pieces in the show. I was very gratified in Los Angeles. LMU is just north of LAX airport. It's on what we call the west side of LA. LA is a very, as you know, humongous place, stretches very far east and west. Historically, it has had centers of populations that break down socioeconomically, that break down by ethnicity. And this project in particular is in East LA. It's very close to when I worked at East LA College. They are like within a couple miles of each other, this Metro BART station. And some of the students at LMU, when they came in and saw the show there, who are from the East Side, said to me, and this was also like my, an affirmation, what's missing? They said, I never thought that LMU was going to show something from East LA. And so these are kind of my, as a curator, my little political insertions. They're the things that I'm trying to introduce and put out into the mix. Again, using that mantra of what is missing. So Sonia got a commission to create one of the very few painted murals at a BART station, we call it Metro, in LA. She beat out legendary artists, most of them a generation or two older than she is. And she really got into what I think is her process that I enjoy so much. The idea for her was to have community in the neighborhood. So this is a very similar neighborhood to the Mission District here in the Bay, or in San Francisco, that it has a long-standing community, Latinx, going back many generations. And she wanted to represent the community with objects that people, if I'm saying this correctly, represented Boyle Heights, right? So the process for her was to, both through flyers, to solicit people in the neighborhood, but then also to approach people. Then she set up a photo booth, hired a photographer, knew that she would be capturing people basically from the elbow, you know, in their hands. Then let me say, so this hat, the picture is taken of the hat. It's then translated into, I don't know software, which software was this? Illustrator or?
I think I was just using Photoshop.
Photoshop. So it's kind of brought out of the photograph into this version. Then Sonia, she doesn't jump from here to here, which she could do. She goes from here to here, and this becomes her model. This is a hand-cut paper piece. Then this is projected onto these 12-foot-high metal heavy panels and uses that then to paint her mural. So it's going from the photograph to the computer, from the computer to the paper, from the paper back into the computer, then it's enlarged, then it's projected, then it's painted. that is exciting to me as a curator. Understanding that, learning about it, celebrating it, showing it, maybe even convincing people art is work. Making art is work. It is not playful always. It is not only decorative. It's ingenious, it's creative. It's about creating your own language and expressing it. I think I'm going to talk about this piece as kind of the last piece and then open up for any kind of questions. When I was in grad school and even in undergrad, I felt really intimidated to ask questions. I think that things have changed since then, but I also didn't realize that it's for someone like me, it's part of my job to be accessible and to be, to share and to support. And I can tell that Glory is a mentor to the students here that work at the Thacher, and that your whole program is kind of set up to support that type of learning, and I applaud it. Because I have observed more programs that are keeping everything in the classroom, keeping it very abstract, and it is really wonderful what I've learned about the experiences that you have both in the classroom and then doing different internships to get the experience out in the world. This piece, we think back to the beginning, the pile, the etching. This was the most recent work that Sonia made. And it's kind of indicative of another element beyond what's missing. Institutionally, I have worked in a community college. I've worked in the UC system. Now I'm at a Catholic Jesuit university. And I also like to take that into consideration in terms of the choices that I've made about artwork and what is on display. And I like to approach kind of topics or ideas that might make my institution, my employer, maybe a tiny bit uncomfortable even. This piece Sonia made for the Laband show, but you were also commissioned by the Hood Museum at Dartmouth. But it's a very California piece. And is anyone here from, or that has a K through 12 education from the state of California? Okay, many of you. So I did not go to school in California in the 4th grade, but the 4th grade, the mission, history of the missions were also all part, we're all part of a Jesuit Catholic institution. As you all know now, because this is part of all of our lives, during COVID, in May of 2020, the killing of George Floyd, we observed, it was for me the biggest uprising in my lifetime, so we're going all the way back to the 1960s in terms of Vietnam protests, that the Black Lives Matter protests around the country and even around the world were some of the most significant, certainly of the 21st century. And the questioning of history and the question of who gets to tell history and what we celebrate in our history, and I mean that as Americans or as Californians, was very much talked about. And one of the focuses of discussions became public art, right? Monuments to soldiers from the Confederacy in my home state of Virginia, like you, we talked yesterday, were defaced. Out here in California, Father Junipero Serra, a Franciscan priest, not a Jesuit, who was canonized by Pope Francis, I think in 2016, became a highly contested, I mean, become is probably not the right word. Things fomented, and he then was a symbol for injustices for indigenous communities in our state. And there was a lot of discussion, I think Sonia had with herself, about also, you are not indigenous, but to take that on and to make work in support of, in allyship with indigenous communities. And is that okay to do? I don't have an answer. I don't know if you do. Can you be an artist and make work about something that has not directly affected you? That's a big topic these days. But she made this piece as a vision of a new monument comprised of all the decommissioned Father Serra statues up and down the state of California. What do you all think of it?
It's amazing.
Having it here at, not LMU, at USF, yeah?
Oh yeah, I think it shows like the power of art as like activism.
Mm.
It's like often, you know, not talked about as much. So I think it's very powerful.
I think that part of the connection to the indigenous culture is that she's Chicana. So even like for myself, I may not know directly where my indigenous roots came from because of colonialism and because of the separation of our families and all that, but there's a connection there. So that's, I mean, it stems from part of that. So, yeah. There's always been a connection. Indigenous cultures and Chicana.
I was very watchful at the opening of Sonia's show in Laband when the title that he has is Chancellor, and he used to be president of Santa Clara University, Father Ang. He's on the search committee for your new president for this university. Came to the opening and like came around the corner and saw this piece. And I haven't talked with him about it. There's a picture with me talking and he's in the background. But I was very grateful that there wasn't any pushback about it.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the show opened and closed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and you're right. Okay, now I'm kind of like, obviously out of it. Yet. Yes. Yeah.
Well, I think like while this piece is really like truly specific to the statues, to their history and these people, it also really invites you to think about the ways in which statues or any sort of like art movement affects the people who were not like kindly invited by these people. it feels very broad while being also very specific.
I definitely feel like it represents the time. You know, in 20 years, this is a great way, like you said, about art having this voice of representing what we all experienced in the last 5 years.
You know, there was a kind of an interesting thing that happened in San Francisco. There's a mural at Washington High School, and people wanted to paint over it because they said it was dehumanizing, and people were crying when they walked past it or laughing when they walked past it. And instead of teaching about it, we're talking about it, we're putting it in the context of the time, we're talking to other people who responded to the mural who were at Washington at the same time. They wanted to erase it, and they didn't put it in a context of, it was actually kind of revolutionary. It was Reagan was trying to take it down. So if you're on the side of Reagan, okay, but you should question it. And it was a, what do you call these names? What do you call it when it's on plaster?
Fresco.
Fresco, thank you, Jesus, I'm old, I no return of memory. But, so for that alone, and who he studied with, you know, the great masters in Mexico, I think you would question it. And it was actually showing some things that were not positive about, you know, Washington. Yeah, it was had in Native American people, supposedly, and kind of positions of like at the knees of somebody. Right. So they, out of the great white hope. But it wasn't to glorify that. It was just to say this is what it is. And that story you read about the cherry trees wasn't really correct. It was a lie. So it was, I'm kind of going on, and I should get to the point, but the point is we went to a protest about that mural, and people were on both sides. People who wanted to keep it from the Historical Society, and people who wanted to paint over it, tear it down, get rid of it, move it somewhere without really thinking what the cost of moving something like that. Would you destroy it and all this other stuff? And so we went to the thing, and we saw our friends there. Some of our friends were activists, and they were holding the protest to take it down. They were Native people. And so they looked at us, and they wanted to give us the T-shirt that they had, protesting, taking it down. And we said, well, we're not really here to support destroying the mural, taking it down. Maybe it could be taught about, maybe it could be, there could be 1,000 things that could be done without having to incur a debt of a lot of money to move it or to destroy it. And so they looked at us first, and they were like all happy to see us. And when we said that, they were like, okay, you can't come to our section or whatever. So we went in and we spoke out about the mural and the importance of the mural. And so did other people, Native American people from the historical, you know, society. But there were a lot of labor folks that were predominantly white males. And they were kind of talking down to everybody. They weren't considering what this might represent to somebody without a context, without a, you know. And so it was interesting to me that they didn't have Dewey Crumpler, who had done a protest mural. Not a protest mural, but a mural parallel, kind of like addressing some of the concerns about the mural. And he wasn't for taking it down and destroying it. They didn't have him there. They didn't have any of the Black Students Union there, which are people that had, you know, had been really the carriers of a kind of forward progress to even get stuff done.
Right.
And so that's the optic that you saw, where there were people, you know, like I said something, and this other brother was really articulate, and there were some people who spoke. But the optic of it was interesting to me, and that the fact that nobody knew that what that looks like when you have a white man telling people of color why they're kind of like not stupid, but they don't really understand what's going on. It's like not taking, so it's really complex. Art is really complex, and that's why you can get in circuitous messages. People don't even know what's going on, and it's very powerful.
It's triggering.
You know? Yeah, and it has to be, it's not real. It's somebody's idea of what might spark a discussion or something.
Right.
So I just think it's really a complex thing, the power of art, but how it's also been usurped by the elites. I mean, museums that cost $35 to go in are not accessible. When I was young, I'm so old, museums were free. You could walk through them and see things. So I'm just saying it's more complicated than, you know, people see, and it's not all great and gravy, because they also take things and distort them and use other people's work that's expressing contrary opinions to represent what the propagandist people want to use it as. So it's kind of interesting, but it's complex.
Have those kinds of conversations, thank you, come up in any classroom discussions that you've had? Yeah?
Oh, would you like me to
Well,
elaborate?
you've spoken out. I don't know if anybody else, I have an example that I read about this morning that I can share, but any,
I have a question.
Karen? Yeah?
Actually, it kind of complements what she was talking about. Just last night, you had the president giving an announcement speech about many things he was going to do, and one of them was that he was going to change, but he has already changed the Gulf of Mexico into the Gulf of America. And to her point, it's really that ideology that we create, our interpretation, right? So what does that mean? Is that for the Americans, is that respect to the Americans? Is that an act of possession? Is that just the point to make it known that it's not Mexico anymore? How do you translate
To me, it just
it?
seems very aggressive,
Absolutely.
right?
But then how is it going to be remembered if it
Well,
sticks?
This morning I read that the District of Columbia, Washington DC, which I visited in the end of 2023, is being blackmailed. The mayor is being blackmailed to erase the Black Lives Matter Plaza that is north of the White House. That is this amazing street graphic. And don't quote me on the numbers, but $150 million of transportation funds will be withheld from our nation's capital unless the mayor erases the tribute and puts a new tribute that has nothing to do with Black Lives Matter. And she said this morning she will do that.
She said what?
She said she will do it.
She's going to remove it?
She's removing it.
You're kidding.
I'm not kidding you.
Well, that won't be hard. All she has to do is put White Lives Matter, and it'll be all settled.
Yeah.
I just want to say that it's one, and this conversation is really important, and I hope people can continue, but I do know some students need to leave, so I just wanted to give them that space to do that.
Yep. Thank you for your
Yeah.
attention.
So please feel free to